The first rain of the season fell steadily over the quiet town in Oregon. At the stone steps of St. Elwood Church, a young woman stood holding her baby tightly against her chest. Her wool coat was soaked through, and the blanket around the child was heavy with water. "I just want to say goodbye to my husband," she said, voice hoarse from sleepless nights. Opposite her stood an older woman in a black dress suit, her expression sharp as steel. In one gloved hand, she held a folded document. "Without your signature on this waiver, you are not stepping into this church," she said. Quinn Holland clutched her son tighter, jaw set. Behind the older woman, a tall man in a navy suit stepped forward. Garrett Landon, her late husband's brother, looked down at her with cold detachment. "You were never really part of this family," he said. "You were a nurse from nowhere. He made a mistake and now it is over." Just beyond them, the church doors stood slightly open. Inside, candles flickered, casting warm light on a photograph of Clay Landon. His smile, captured and framed, stared back in silence. White lilies lined the altar. It was a farewell she had no place in. "I do not want your money," Quinn said quietly, voice firm. "I just want to say goodbye." "Then sign," the older woman said, her tone cutting. "Sign away any claim to his name, his legacy, and to whatever he might have left behind for that child." Quinn looked down at her baby. His cheeks were flushed from the cold. She kissed his forehead, then raised her eyes again. "No." The single word dropped like a stone. Garrett's hand shot out, gripping her arm. He pulled her backward with force. "Then leave," he said. The baby cried out as Quinn stumbled down the steps. She caught the railing just in time, shielding her son with her body. Her heart pounded. Behind her, the church doors slammed shut. "You are causing a scene," the woman hissed. "This is a respected family." Quinn looked around. People had turned away. Some whispered. No one helped. No one looked her in the eye. She stood frozen for a moment, then walked away from the church. Her steps were heavy, directionless. She passed the corner and sat on a concrete bench beside an old bus stop. Rain fell harder now. Her coat clung to her skin. She pulled her son closer and began to hum a lullaby under her breath. Memories came back like waves. Clay in their apartment, smiling through pain, holding her hand the night before he passed. He had whispered something to her then. "If anything happens, he will come." She had not understood at the time. But now, as she sat soaked and trembling on the sidewalk, she realized Clay had known this would happen. He had known his family would shut her out. A black car slowed to a stop in front of her. The engine turned off. A moment later, the back door opened. A man stepped out holding a large black umbrella. He walked through the rain with purple shoes splashing softly in puddles. "Quinn Holland?" he asked. She looked up. The man was tall, mid-30s, olive skin, dark eyes. He wore a charcoal coat and no tie. His presence was calm, grounded. "My name is Ethan Rhodes," he said. "I was Clay's friend." Quinn blinked. She did not know the name. "I know you've never heard of me," he said gently. "Clay and I met years ago in South America. There was an accident. I was trapped injured. He carried me to help. He saved my life." Ethan glanced at the child in her arms. "He told me about you. He said if anything ever happened, I had to find you, help you, protect you." From the car, Ethan retrieved a weathered envelope. He held it out with both hands. "This is not a contract," he said. "It is something Clay made me write. A promise. In his words, I am to treat you like family. No conditions, no expectations. Just care. Quinn held the envelope, hands shaking, her eyes locked with Ethan's. "I do not know you," she whispered. "You are not supposed to," he replied. "I am not here to rescue you. I am here because Clay asked me to be." Quinn looked down at her baby, who stirred in his sleep. Her lips parted, barely audible. "I have nowhere to go." "Then let us start with that," Ethan said softly. "There is a place. Safe. Warm. Just for now." He opened the car door again and waited. Quinn stayed still for a long moment, then stood, her legs weak. Ethan offered his hand. She hesitated, then placed her hand into his. It was warm. And for the first time since Clay's death, she felt the smallest shift inside her, like something beginning to breathe again. She stepped into the car. The car ride was quiet. Quinn stared out the rain-speckled window, her son sleeping in her arms. Ethan did not speak unless necessary. He simply drove with care, the soft hum of the engine blending with the sound of the rain. They arrived at a small apartment complex on a quiet street. It was modern but modest, surrounded by maple trees whose wet leaves clung to the pavement. Ethan parked and stepped out first, opening the door for her without a word. She followed her movements, slow and uncertain. Inside the apartment was warm, softly lit. There were no harsh overhead lights, only gentle floor lamps that glowed like candlelight. Quinn stood in the entryway, holding her son tightly. Her shoes left small, wet prints on the wooden floor. "You can stay as long as you need," Ethan said, setting down a small suitcase he had retrieved from the trunk. "No one else lives here. It is yours for now." She did not move. Ethan turned and walked toward a door at the end of the hall. "This room is for the baby," he said. The door creaked open. Quinn followed. Inside, the nursery was simple but full of care. A white crib sat beneath a window with sheer curtains. A soft gray blanket lay folded at the foot. On the shelves were small plush toys and colorful board books. A set of clean bottles sat beside a formula container. Diapers were stacked neatly below the changing table. There was even a small rocking chair in the corner with a yellow cushion. Quinn stared. "I had help," Ethan said quickly, sensing her hesitation. "A friend of mine has a baby girl. She helped me choose what was safe, what would be needed." Quinn took a breath. The air smelled like lavender and clean linen. "Thank you," she said, barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded once. "I will be in the office down the hall if you need anything." Then he left her alone. She stood in the room for a long time, eyes sweeping over every detail. No names, no assumptions. Nothing claimed the space. Just quiet readiness. Later that night, after settling her son to sleep in the crib, she sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room. The sheets were crisp. A folded towel and a new toothbrush waited on the dresser. Outside, the rain had stopped. But inside her, the storm continued. Over the next few days, Ethan kept his word. He was present, but never too close. He worked from a small office at the end of the hall. He brewed coffee in the mornings, left groceries in the fridge, and made sure the apartment stayed clean. He did not ask questions. He did not watch her. He let her be. And still, Quinn kept her guard up. She checked the locks twice every night. She avoided eye contact when passing him in the hallway. Her voice remained quiet, clipped. Years of hardship had trained her to be cautious. Kindness often came with hidden hooks. But with Ethan, the silence stayed kind. He never pressed. Then one afternoon, something shifted. It was a simple moment. She had just put her son down for a nap and stepped into the guest room. On the nightstand beside the lamp sat a small photo frame. She paused. It was a picture of Clay, not a formal one. Just him laughing in front of a taco truck, mustard on his shirt, sun in his hair. She had taken that photo on their third date. Her breath caught. She walked over and picked it up. The glass was clean. The frame looked recently wiped. Underneath it was a folded note in clear handwriting. "He is still here." Quinn turned. Ethan stood in the hallway holding a dish towel. He had not knocked. He was not intruding, just present. "I found it in a box Clay left with me," he said. "I thought maybe it would help." "You cleaned it," she murmured. He nodded. "I wanted it to look like it mattered." She swallowed hard. No one had done something like this since Clay passed. Everyone else had urged her to move on to heal faster, but Ethan had honored what was. She placed the photo back with care, her hand lingering on the frame. "Thank you," she said. Ethan offered a gentle nod and turned away, leaving her in the quiet. In that stillness, something deep inside her began to thaw. For the first time, she did not feel like a guest. She felt seen. And in that moment, Clay did not feel gone. He felt near. It was late evening when Quinn first noticed the wooden box. It sat quietly on the top shelf of the closet in her room, small and unassuming, the kind of object that could be mistaken for something forgotten until needed. Taped gently to the lid was a note written in the same careful handwriting as the one beneath Clay's photo. "When you are ready, E." She hesitated before reaching for it. The box was light, but it carried a weight she could feel in her chest. She brought it down slowly and set it on the bed. When she lifted the lid, she found several envelopes yellowed with time and bound with a faded blue ribbon. Her hands trembled. The first letter was addressed not to her, but to Ethan. "Ethan, if you're reading this, I probably could not dodge what was coming. Cancer is a slow thief, but it is honest. Thank you for being there. And now I need one more thing. A promise." Quinn's eyes began to sting as she kept reading. "Quinn will not trust you right away. She will be quiet, afraid, angry. Do not try to fix it. Just make tea. Sit near her. She will speak when her heart can carry the weight." She pressed the letter against her chest, then reached for the second envelope. This one was addressed to her. The handwriting was familiar, loose, and a little crooked, like Clay's voice always had been warm, but always rushing ahead. "Quinn, I wanted to write this before my thoughts blurred. I hate that I will not be the one holding you through this. But I left you in the care of someone who sees you not just as my wife, but as your own soul. I trusted Ethan not because he's strong or smart or good with words. I trusted him because he understands silence. He understands that kindness does not need to be witnessed to be real." Quinn covered her mouth as the tears fell freely now. "If you are still afraid, let him make the tea. Let him listen. You were never just my wife. You were my miracle. I love you always, Clay." She clutched the letter in both hands and wept into the quiet of the room. Not the sharp, panicked weeping of fresh grief, but the slow, aching kind that came when something deep began to release. That night, she did not sleep. At dawn, she rose and walked into the kitchen, her robe drawn tightly around her. The air was still. Light from the window spilled across the floor in long golden lines. Ethan stood at the stove. He did not look up when she entered. He simply reached for a mug, poured hot water over chamomile, and set it on the table. Then he sat down across from her. Not too close, not too far. He did not ask questions. He did not try to say things that could not reach the ache inside her. He just stayed. I read them, she said softly. I know, he replied. She looked down into the rising steam, then back up at him. He knew me, she whispered, voice trembling, even at the end. Ethan nodded. He did. And he trusted you to keep living, just as you are. They sat in silence for a long time. The kind of silence that does not need filling. Then Quinn did something she had not done with anyone since Clay. She spoke, not about grief or lawyers or what she had lost, but about life. She told Ethan about her childhood in rural Virginia, how she used to dance in the rain on the roof of her grandparents' farmhouse. She told him how she had learned Spanish by watching soap operas late at night, just to impress Clay when they first met. She told him about the first time Clay tried to cook dinner and nearly burned down her apartment. About how he used to write her silly notes on receipts and napkins. About how he once held her hand in the dark and said, "If everything else fades, I will still choose you." Ethan did not interrupt. When she paused, he handed her a napkin. Not a speech, not a fix. Just presence. By the time the tea had gone cold, something had changed between them. Not love, not yet, but something steady, something real, a beginning. The envelope came in the morning mail, thick, cream-colored, embossed with gold lettering. Quinn knew, even before opening it, that it carried trouble. She stood at the kitchen table, her son balanced on her hip, and opened it with careful fingers. Inside was a formal notice from the court. Margaret and Garrett Landon were filing for full custody of her child. They claimed she was emotionally unstable, financially dependent, unfit. The paper blurred as her hands began to shake. Ethan stepped in from the hallway, already reading the panic in her eyes. He took the envelope from her hands and read it silently, his jaw tightening. When he finished, he looked at her and said with calm certainty, "They are not taking your son." Quinn's voice cracked. "They have money, lawyers. They can say anything." And Ethan gently placed a hand over hers. "Then we will not just fight. We will show the truth." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of quiet determination. Ethan did not charge into courtrooms or bark into phones. He worked steadily, purposefully, late nights in the office, phone calls with social workers and character witnesses, carefully written responses. Calm but firm, and something else. Every night when Quinn had gone to bed, Ethan had gone to work collecting moments. He found photos some Quinn had not even known existed, ones he had quietly taken over the past few weeks. Her reading to her son in the nursery, whispering both English and Spanish. Her bathing him with a towel wrapped around her shoulders, singing softly. Her holding him close during his fever, rocking in the quiet of the living room. Each photo was printed, dated, and captioned. Then one evening he placed a leather-bound album on the table in front of her. The child's name was engraved on the cover. "This," Ethan said, "is not evidence. It is a story, his story, and yours." Quinn flipped through the pages, stunned. Her hands moved slowly. Her eyes filled with tears she did not try to hide. "You made this," Ethan nodded. "You never saw yourself the way I see you," he said. The hearing took place on a rainy Thursday morning. The courtroom was clinical. Pale walls, metal chairs, the kind of place designed to make emotion feel like a threat. Margaret and Garrett arrived with 2 attorneys and carefully prepared statements. Their expressions were calm, calculated. Their evidence was stacked in folders lined with tabs. Quinn sat still, her son with a caregiver just outside the room. She could hear him faintly babbling softly in the hallway. When her name was called, she stood. Her voice wavered. Her answers came out clipped and uncertain. She fumbled once, then twice. Panic pressed against her throat like a hand. She looked over. Ethan was sitting beside her. Under the table, his hand found hers, a quiet squeeze, solid, grounding. It did not erase her fear, but it gave her enough strength to keep standing. Then it was Ethan's turn. He rose and walked to the center of the room. He carried the album like it was something sacred. When he reached the judge's bench, he opened it slowly and placed it between them. This, he said, his voice even and clear, is what motherhood looks like. He turned a page. A woman teaching her son the word for light. Another page. A woman awake all night with a fevered child. Another. A woman who has asked for nothing but the chance to raise her son with love and dignity. He paused. I am not here because Clay Landon asked me to protect her. I am here because I have seen her. Every single day. And no man living or gone would look at this woman and call her anything less than a mother. The courtroom fell silent. Even Margaret looked away. The judge turned each page carefully. Then she closed the album, folded her hands, and said simply, "Thank you, Mr. Rhodes." Outside, the rain had slowed to a gentle mist. Quinn stepped into the open-air lungs, expanding for the first time in hours. Ethan stood beside her. "You did not have to do all of that," she whispered. He looked at her, steady as ever. "Yes," he said. "I did." And for the first time, Quinn did not feel like someone surviving. She felt like someone worth standing beside. The knock came just as the sun began to dip behind the city skyline, painting the windows in shades of amber and rose. Quinn had just finished settling her son into his crib. She stood in the hallway, still and tense, as the knock came again. Not loud, not urgent, just deliberate, intentional. From the kitchen, Ethan appeared, drying his hands with a towel. Their eyes met. "You do not have to open it," he said calmly. "But if you do, whatever happens next, just know I will be here when it is over." Quinn gave a small nod and walked slowly to the door. When she opened it, Margaret Landon stood there. The woman looked older than Quinn remembered. Her silver hair was pinned carefully, her coat dry and pressed. But something in her face had softened, not surrender exactly, but the absence of sharpness. Margaret said nothing. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded cloth, cream-colored with a faded blue border. Quinn's breath caught. That cloth. She remembered it. She had used it to wipe Clay's forehead during his final hours in the hospital. In the chaos and grief, she had left it on the chair. Too numb to notice. Too broken to return. Now it was here. Clean, folded, and held in both of Margaret's hands. Margaret extended it toward her, her eyes unreadable. Quinn took it with trembling fingers. The weight of it was unbearable. She whispered. He loved this. Margaret's voice, when it came, was quiet and almost fragile. He kept it under his pillow. That was all. No apology. No explanation. Just the return of something sacred. Quinn looked up, unsure whether to say something to invite her in or simply to nod. Margaret only stood there for a moment longer, lips parting slightly, as if to speak, then closing again. She turned and walked down the hallway, her footsteps light on the pavement. Quinn closed the door slowly behind her. For a long moment, she stood in the stillness of the apartment, clutching the cloth to her chest. Then her knees began to weaken. She walked down the hallway toward the kitchen. The light above the table was on, casting a soft, golden glow across the room. Ethan sat there, a book open in front of him, a mug of tea steaming at his side. Next to the tea was a small folded towel. He looked up when she entered. Her face was streaked with silent tears, her arms still wrapped around the returned handkerchief, like it was a lifeline. Without a word, Ethan pushed the towel toward her and stood halfway from his seat, offering it gently. "You do not have to be strong right now," he said, voice steady. Quinn sat beside him and wiped her face with the towel, still holding the handkerchief in her lap. They said nothing. Not because there was nothing to say, but because what needed to be felt did not require words. In that quiet, something shifted again. It was the first moment they shared that did not belong to Clay's memory. It belonged to them. Not as a widow and a caretaker, but as two people who knew how to stay, even when everything else had fallen away. The backyard behind the apartment was small and bordered by ivy-covered brick. A wooden fence, faded from seasons of rain and sun, closed it in from the noise of the city. String lights hung overhead, swaying gently in the early evening breeze. On folding tables, tea candles flickered beside plates of fresh fruit pastries and mismatched ceramic mugs. Quinn stepped back and looked at it all. It was not a memorial. It was not meant for mourning. It was a gathering. Simple, quiet, honest. Her idea. No suits. No speeches she had told Ethan. Just stories. Good ones. He had nodded once and said, "Then we will make it beautiful." And he did. She had watched him climb a shaky ladder at midnight to hang the lights. He had arranged every chair exactly how she described, moved planters, swept leaves. When her energy dipped, he brought tea. When she hesitated, he reassured her with only a glance. He never made it about himself, only about Clay, and somehow about her. Guests began to arrive just after sunset. Neighbors, former co-workers, volunteers from the shelters Clay once supported. No one came dressed in black. No one brought flowers. Just memories. Quinn greeted each person gently, her son on one hip. His tiny hand kept tugging at the edge of her shawl, grounding her. A woman told her how Clay had once paid for her daughter's surgery when insurance refused. He left the money in an envelope on their porch, unsigned. An older man recalled how Clay brought him dinner every Thursday after work, never missing a week, never asking for anything in return. A teenager stood near the fence and said, "He told me once that I wasn't my mistakes, that I got to decide who I was next." That boy was now in college. Each story peeled back a new piece of the man Quinn had loved. Not as the husband who shared her bed, but as someone who had quietly given more of himself than she ever realized. It humbled her. It healed something she had not known was still broken. As the sky turned to night, the garden filled with soft light and laughter. The lights above glowed like golden halos, and the hush of classical guitar played through an old speaker someone had brought from home. Quinn had just finished refilling the tea station when she turned to scan the garden. In the far corner near the lavender bushes, she saw Ethan. He was holding her son, bouncing him gently in his arms. The boy giggled, reaching up to tug on Ethan's collar, and Ethan laughed, quiet and full, not to perform, just to share in the moment. Quinn stood still for a few seconds, taking in the scene. She had seen Ethan serious, steady, protective, but this was something else. This was tenderness without effort, fatherly without claim. She walked across the garden slowly, her shawl catching the breeze. The lights above caught in her hair, and her feet made soft sounds on the stone path. When she reached him, she placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. Ethan looked at her, surprised at first, but only for a moment. Then he nodded. He understood. She did not need to speak. She did not need to explain what had shifted inside her. There were no ghosts between them anymore. Only now. The child in his arms, the warmth of her hand, the quiet of shared breath. And for the first time, Quinn was not stepping out of grief. She was stepping into something new. And it felt right. 3 years passed. Not loudly, not with fanfare, but with steady footsteps and quiet mornings. There were no headlines about Quinn and Ethan. No wedding announcements in glossy magazines. No rings flashed under restaurant lights. No dramatic proposals. But there was something stronger than all of that. There was rhythm. Together they had built a life. Together they had built Michael's light. It began in the corners of late-night conversations. Quinn had said one evening, "There are other women like me. Widows, single mothers, women no one stands up for." Ethan had nodded and without hesitation offered, "Then let's create a place where they are seen." It started small, a single room in a shared workspace, a coffee machine, and a stack of resource guides. But it grew. Now Michael's light was a foundation for women who had once stood where Quinn had. Women pushed aside. Women told they were not enough. Women holding babies in the rain with no place to go. Quinn was its face. She greeted every woman who walked through the doors, as if greeting herself from years ago. Not with pity, with dignity. She did not hand them answers. She handed them time and space and belief. "I know what it's like," she often said. "To feel like you've lost everything and still have to get up and hold a child. But you don't have to do it alone." Her voice came from lived truth. Her words carried weight because they were never rehearsed. Behind the scenes, Ethan handled the rest. Legal paperwork, fundraising, building networks. He never stepped in front of a camera, never gave interviews, never wanted his name on plaques. He let the light fall on Quinn and stood just outside of it, proud, content. Every now and then people would ask if they were married. Quinn would smile and say simply, "We are exactly where we're meant to be." At home, their life was stitched together by small rituals. Ethan brewed coffee every morning before Quinn woke. She packed him lunch with a handwritten note tucked inside. Friday nights were for puzzles and storybooks and giggling under blanket forts. Her son, now nearly 4, called Ethan simply T. No one corrected him. No one needed to. Love had found its own name. It did not need a title. It had become something stronger than vows, trust built daily. On the 3rd anniversary of the foundation, Quinn stood by the glass window of their office. Outside, the sun slanted over the street, and women she once held through tears now walked with resumes in hand, with hope. Behind her, a quiet voice spoke. "You ready for the walk?" She turned. Ethan stood by the door, one hand resting on the stroller's handle. The little boy inside was dozing, his cheeks pink from an afternoon nap. Quinn smiled and nodded. She slipped on her shawl and took Ethan's hand. They stepped outside together. The park across the street had turned golden with fallen leaves. Children laughed in the distance. The breeze smelled like cinnamon and rain. They walked without hurry, their fingers lightly interlocked. Quinn glanced sideways at Ethan. He was pointing at birds, humming softly, naming trees. Her son stirred, then grinned at the sound of his voice. Quinn looked forward again, her heart full. This was not the life she thought she would have. It was better. It was honest. And in that image, 2 people walking side by side, one child nestled between them, the world moving gently around their silence. There was no need for more. No labels, no ceremonies, just love, real, rooted, enough.